It was a bitter winter night in Montana, where the winds howled mercilessly across the empty highway, and snow drifted in ethereal swirls under the flickering lights of the Pinewood Gas Station. Mike Thompson, the night shift attendant, was counting down the hours until dawn, his thoughts drifting between the warmth of his upcoming morning coffee and the monotony of another quiet night. But nothing could have prepared him for the sight that would soon appear at his door. A sight that would challenge everything he thought he knew about the wild creatures of these mountains and the boundaries between human civilization and nature's realm. The Pinewood Gas Station stood as a lonely sentinel on Highway 93, a crucial pit stop for travelers braving the treacherous mountain passes that connected the scattered towns of western Montana. Its weathered sign had guided weary drivers for decades, offering refuge from the elements and a brief respite from the isolation of the road. Tonight, the temperature had plummeted well below zero, transforming the world outside into a crystalline landscape of ice and shadow. The forecasters had warned of one of the worst winter storms in recent memory, and their predictions were proving devastatingly accurate. Mike had worked the night shift at Pinewood for nearly 5 years, finding an odd comfort in the solitude of those long, dark hours. At 43, he had seen his fair share of strange occurrences, lost travelers, broken-down vehicles, and the occasional wildlife sighting. But in all his years manning the store, he had developed a quiet appreciation for the predictable rhythm of his nights. Every hour brought its familiar routine, checking the fuel gauges, restocking the coffee station, and keeping the store's interior warm against the creeping cold. The station's fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow across the empty parking lot, creating islands of brightness in the surrounding darkness. The wind continued its relentless assault, rattling the windows and whistling through the gaps in the old building's frame. Mike had just finished his regular inventory check when he noticed something peculiar about the security camera feed displayed on the ancient monitor behind the counter. A shadow, too deliberate in its movement to be mere wind-blown debris, was making its way across the edge of the screen. At first, he dismissed it as another piece of tumbling garbage, or perhaps a confused deer, both common enough sights on stormy nights. But as he watched more closely, the movement caught his attention again. There was something different about this shadow, something that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. It moved with purpose, yet hesitantly, as if uncertain of its surroundings. Mike leaned closer to the grainy monitor, his coffee forgotten in his hand, as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. The shadow disappeared from view, only to reappear on another camera angle, closer now to the station's front door. In the harsh, artificial light, Mike could finally make out what was causing the mysterious movement, and his heart nearly stopped. There, padding cautiously through the snow, was a bear cub, small, clearly exhausted, and moving with a desperate determination that seemed almost human. Its fur was matted with ice, and its movements showed signs of extreme fatigue. Mike's first instinct was to reach for the phone and call animal control, but something made him pause. In all his years in Montana, he had never seen a bear cub approach a human structure so deliberately, especially not in the dead of winter when they should be deep in hibernation. The sight stirred something in him, a mixture of concern and curiosity that overrode his natural caution. He watched, transfixed, as the small creature made its way closer to the station's entrance. The security camera's view shifted again as the cub moved into the blind spot near the door. Mike's pulse quickened as he realized he would need to move from behind the counter to keep track of the animal. Years of experience had taught him to be wary of wild creatures, especially bears, but the obvious distress of this young animal tugged at something deeper than his learned caution. With slow, deliberate movements, he emerged from behind the counter and approached the front windows. Through the glass, he could now see the cub clearly. It was smaller than he had initially thought, probably no more than a few months old, and its condition was worse than the cameras had revealed. The animal's eyes held a glazed look of exhaustion, and its movements were becoming increasingly unsteady. As Mike watched, the cub raised itself on its hind legs and pressed a paw against the glass door, leaving a smear in the frost that had accumulated there. The gesture was so unexpected, so seemingly purposeful, that Mike felt his throat tighten with emotion. The night suddenly seemed to hold its breath. The howling wind faded into background noise as Mike stood there, barely 3 feet of glass, separating him from this wild creature that seemed to be asking for something he couldn't quite comprehend. In that moment, he wasn't just a gas station attendant anymore. He was facing a decision that felt monumentally important, though he couldn't have explained why. The cub's eyes met his through the glass, and Mike saw something there that shook him to his core. It wasn't just fear or exhaustion in those dark eyes, but a desperate intelligence that seemed to reach across the divide between their species. The animal swayed slightly on its feet, and Mike realized with a start that if he didn't do something soon, this young bear might not survive the night. The temperature was still dropping, and the storm showed no signs of relenting. His hand moved toward the door lock of its own accord, even as his mind raced through all the reasons this was probably a terrible idea. Where was the mother bear? Was the cub sick or injured? What would happen if he opened that door? But even as these questions tumbled through his thoughts, Mike knew he had already made his decision. In all his years of working nights, watching the endless parade of travelers and weather fronts pass by his window, he had never faced a moment quite like this, a moment where the line between what was safe and what was right seemed to blur into insignificance. The security cameras continued their silent vigil, recording every second of this unprecedented encounter. Their footage would later become part of a story that would spread far beyond the confines of this remote gas station, touching hearts and challenging assumptions about the relationship between humans and wild animals. But for now, in this moment, frozen between decision and action, Mike Thompson stood alone with his choice, watching a desperate young bear that had somehow found its way to his door on this bitter Montana night. The storm raged on outside, casting swirling shadows across the parking lot as Mike's hand reached for the door lock. He knew that whatever happened next would change everything. His night, his understanding of these mountains and their creatures, and perhaps even his life. The small click of the lock disengaging seemed to echo in the empty store, a sound that would mark the beginning of an extraordinary tale of compassion, survival, and the unexpected connections that can form in the most desperate of circumstances. As the door cracked open, letting in a blast of frigid air, Mike held his breath. The bear cub stumbled backward slightly, startled by the sudden movement, but didn't retreat. Instead, it swayed unsteadily on its feet, looking up at Mike with those haunting eyes that seemed to hold both fear and desperate hope. The wind howled through the gap in the door, carrying swirls of snow into the fluorescent-lit interior of the store. Mike's heart pounded in his chest as he realized there was no turning back now. The young bear's fur was crusted with ice, and up close, Mike could see that it was trembling violently. Its small frame showed signs of significant weight loss, unusual for a bear that should have been plump with winter fat. Something had clearly gone terribly wrong for this cub to be out in such conditions, separated from its mother and seeking human contact. Mike's mind raced through possibilities. Had there been an accident, a natural disaster that had disturbed their den? Whatever the cause, the immediate need was clear. With slow, deliberate movements, Mike reached behind the counter and grabbed several clean shop towels he kept for customers. The cub watched his every move, but remained surprisingly still, as if understanding that sudden movements from either of them could shatter this fragile moment of trust. The security cameras continued their silent recording, capturing every second of this unprecedented encounter. Later, Mike would be grateful for this documentation, though at the moment he wasn't thinking about anything beyond the immediate crisis before him. "Easy there, little one," Mike murmured, his voice barely audible above the wind. He knew bears could be unpredictable, even young ones, but something about this cub's demeanor told him it was too exhausted and desperate to pose a real threat. Still, he maintained a respectful distance as he slowly knelt and placed the towels on the floor between them. The cub's eyes followed his movements, showing an intelligence that seemed almost uncanny. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as the cub took a tentative step forward, then another. Its paws left wet prints on the linoleum floor, and Mike noticed with concern that they seemed raw and bleeding in places, evidence of a long journey through the harsh terrain. The young bear's movements were becoming increasingly unsteady, suggesting that it was nearing the limits of its endurance. Mike knew he needed to act quickly but carefully. Reaching for his phone, Mike dialed the emergency wildlife response number he kept posted near the register. The line rang several times before connecting to an automated message. The storm had apparently affected the phone services in the area. He tried another number, then another, but each attempt met with the same result. The realization settled over him like a weight. For now at least, he was on his own with this situation. The cub had managed to drag itself onto one of the towels, leaving small smears of blood and melting snow. Its trembling had intensified, and Mike recognized the signs of severe hypothermia from his wilderness first aid training. Without immediate intervention, the young bear's chances of survival were slim. Making a decision, Mike moved slowly to the store's small break room, keeping one eye on the cub through the doorway as he gathered supplies. The break room's microwave hummed as Mike heated water, carefully testing the temperature to ensure it wouldn't be too hot. He soaked several more towels in the warm water, wringing them out until they were just damp. The sound of something falling in the main store made him hurry back, only to find the cub had knocked over a display of energy drinks in an attempt to follow him. The sight would have been almost comical under different circumstances, this wild creature leaving wet paw prints among scattered cans of Red Bull. Moving with the same careful deliberation, Mike approached the cub with the warm towels. The young bear's initial wariness seemed to have given way to complete exhaustion, and it offered no resistance as he carefully began to remove the ice from its fur. Up close, Mike could see that the cub was male, probably no more than 8 months old. Its condition told a story of hardship. Besides the obvious cold injury, there were small cuts and bruises visible through its fur, suggesting a difficult journey through rough terrain. Time seemed to move strangely as Mike worked, the howling storm outside creating a backdrop to this surreal scene. The cub gradually stopped shivering as its body temperature began to normalize, though its breathing remained labored. Mike found himself talking softly to the animal, meaningless words of encouragement that seemed to have a calming effect on them both. The security cameras continued their silent witness, recording every gentle interaction between man and bear. The sound of an approaching vehicle caught Mike's attention, and he glanced at the clock with surprise. It was already past midnight, time for Jerry's regular fuel delivery. The headlights of the fuel truck swept across the windows, and Mike felt a sudden surge of anxiety. How would he explain this situation? Would Jerry understand, or would he insist on calling authorities that might not have the cub's best interests at heart? The bear cub sensed the change in Mike's demeanor and tried to stand, but its legs buckled beneath it. The sound of truck doors slamming outside was followed by hurried footsteps. Jerry was probably running to escape the bitter cold. Mike made a split-second decision and quickly moved to intercept him before he could enter the store, hoping to prepare him for what he was about to see. The door burst open, bringing another swirl of snow and a blast of Arctic air. Jerry stumbled in, stamping his feet and pulling off his heavy gloves. Christ almighty, Mike, it's getting worse out there. You wouldn't believe what I saw on the way. Trees down everywhere and the passes completely. His voice trailed off as he caught sight of Mike's expression. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Mike took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. Jerry, I need you to stay calm and listen to me. Something's happened. Something you're not going to believe unless you see it with your own eyes. But I need you to promise me you'll keep an open mind and help me figure out what to do. He gestured toward the store's interior, where the bear cub lay partially visible behind a shelf. Jerry's eyes widened as he caught sight of the young bear, and his hand instinctively moved toward the bear spray on his belt. Mike quickly placed himself between Jerry and the cub, speaking in urgent whispers. He came to the door, Jerry. He was dying out there. I've tried calling wildlife services, but the phones are down. I couldn't just leave him to freeze. The words tumbled out, Mike trying to make his friend understand the impossible situation he'd found himself in. The older man's expression shifted from shock to disbelief, to something more complex as he took in the scene. The wet towels, the scattered energy drinks, the small bear that was now watching them both with those eerily intelligent eyes. Jerry had worked these mountains for over 30 years, and he'd seen things that defied explanation, but this was something entirely new. He removed his hand from the bear spray, his weathered face softening as he studied the cub more closely. Jerry removed his heavy winter coat, movements deliberately slow as he processed the unprecedented situation before him. The bear cub had managed to raise its head slightly at the newcomer's arrival, but remained curled on the towels, too weak to show any sign of aggression or fear. With decades of mountain experience behind him, Jerry knew this wasn't normal behavior for any wild animal, let alone a bear. His expression shifted from concern to curiosity as he knelt down for a better look. I've seen a lot of strange things in these mountains, Mike. But this... Jerry shook his head, his voice trailing off as he studied the cub's condition. Something's very wrong here. Bears this age should be denned up with their mothers, not wandering around in a storm like this. He gestured toward the cub's injured paws and matted fur. These wounds aren't fresh. This little guy's been on his own for a while. The storm outside intensified, rattling the windows with renewed fury. The fluorescent lights flickered ominously, reminding both men of the precarious situation they found themselves in. If the power went out, keeping the cub warm would become even more challenging. Mike moved to the store's small storage room, returning with emergency lanterns and batteries, setting them up as a precaution. "What do you think happened to the mother?" Mike asked, voicing the question that had been nagging at him since the cub first appeared. Jerry's face darkened as he considered the possibilities. In his years of driving these mountain roads, he'd seen the aftermath of too many wildlife encounters gone wrong. Accidents, poaching, natural disasters. Each scenario he considered seemed more troubling than the last. "Could be anything," Jerry finally responded, running a hand through his graying hair. "There was some logging activity up near Thompson Pass last week. Might have disturbed their den. Or maybe—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "There have been reports of poachers in the area. Game wardens found some bear traps last month, illegal ones. If the mother got caught in one of those—" The implications hung heavy in the air. The cub stirred restlessly, as if sensing the gravity of their discussion. Mike found himself moving closer to the young bear, an inexplicable need to offer comfort overwhelming his earlier caution. The cub's eyes, though dulled by exhaustion, followed his movements with that same unsettling intelligence. Jerry pulled out his satellite phone, more reliable than regular cell service in these conditions. "I know some people who might be able to help," he explained, dialing a number from memory. "Old friends from my game warden days. They're not official anymore, but they know these mountains better than anyone, and they've got experience with wildlife rescue." As Jerry stepped away to make his call, Mike noticed the cub attempting to stand again. This time, its legs seemed steadier, though still weak. The warm towels and shelter had clearly helped, but the young bear was severely dehydrated. Mike filled a shallow bowl with water and placed it near the cub, keeping his movements slow and predictable. The security cameras continued their silent recording as the cub cautiously approached the water. Its movements were still uncoordinated, but there was a newfound strength in its bearing that gave Mike hope. As the young bear drank, Mike noticed more details about its condition. A small notch in its left ear, a distinctive pattern in its fur that almost resembled a figure 8. These markings could help identify it if anyone reported a missing cub. Jerry returned, his expression both worried and determined. "I got through to Tom and Sarah Blackwood," he announced, keeping his voice low. "They're about 40 miles out trying to wait out the storm in their cabin. Said they'll head this way as soon as it's safe to travel, but that could be hours, maybe not until morning." The news settled over them like a heavy blanket. Hours of waiting in this strange limbo, trying to keep a wild bear cub alive and calm. In a gas station convenience store. The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on either man, but there was also a sense that they were part of something extraordinary. Something that transcended the normal boundaries between wilderness and civilization. Mike found himself sharing his observations about the cub's markings with Jerry, who listened intently while making notes on his phone. "Good thinking," the older man nodded. "Tom and Sarah maintain records of all the bears in this region. These details might help them figure out where this little one came from." The cub had finished drinking and was now watching them with renewed interest, its eyes moving between the two men as if following their conversation. There was something almost human in its gaze, a quality that made both men increasingly certain that helping it had been the right choice. regardless of the risks and complications. Jerry checked his watch and frowned at the time. "I need to radio in about the fuel delivery," he said reluctantly. "Can't skip it even with all this going on. Company policy." He glanced at the cub, then back at Mike. "You okay here for a few minutes? I'll try to make it quick." As Jerry stepped outside to make his call, Mike found himself alone again with the young bear. The store's heating system hummed steadily, creating a cocoon of warmth that contrasted sharply with the howling storm outside. The cub had settled back onto the towels, but remained alert, watching Mike with those intelligent eyes that seemed to hold so many unspoken questions. Mike used the quiet moment to check the store's supplies, gathering items they might need. More towels, first aid supplies, some honey from the shelf that might help provide the cub with much-needed energy. As he moved around the store, he found himself talking softly to the bear, explaining each action as if the cub could understand. Perhaps it was for his own comfort as much as the bear's, a way of maintaining some semblance of normalcy in this extraordinary situation. The security footage would later show these quiet moments in perfect detail. A man and a wild creature sharing space with an unlikely comfort, each seeming to understand the gravity and strangeness of their circumstance. The cameras captured Mike's gentle movements, the cub's attentive gaze, the way they seemed to have reached an understanding that defied natural law. When Jerry returned, his cheeks red from the bitter cold, he carried an air of urgency. "Road. Report's not good," he announced, stamping snow from his boots. "Highway patrols closing the pass, storms getting worse, and they're reporting whiteout conditions up high. Tom and Sarah?" He paused, glancing at the cub. "They're going to try to make it, but it might be a long wait." The news settled over the store like a physical presence. The wind outside seemed to howl in response, and the lights flickered again, more persistently this time. Mike and Jerry exchanged glances, both understanding the implications. They were possibly facing hours alone with a wild bear cub in deteriorating conditions, with no guarantee of when help might arrive. The situation that had already seemed extraordinary was becoming even more complex. The cub, perhaps sensing their concern, attempted to stand again. This time its movements were more coordinated, though still cautious. It took a few unsteady steps toward Mike, then stopped, as if uncertain of its own intentions. The moment hung suspended in the fluorescent-lit space, a wild creature seeking comfort from the very beings its instincts should have told it to fear. The lights flickered, one final time before plunging the gas station into darkness. The sudden absence of the familiar fluorescent hum left an eerie silence, broken only by the howling wind outside and the soft, startled whimper from the bear cub. Mike's hands moved automatically to the emergency lanterns he'd prepared, casting the store in a warm, golden glow that created long shadows among the shelves. "Perfect timing," Jerry muttered, his breath visible in the rapidly cooling air. The store's heating system had fallen silent with the power, and already the temperature was beginning to drop. The bear cub, still weak but more alert now, had pressed itself against a shelf, eyes reflecting the lantern light like amber coins in the darkness. Mike quickly assessed their situation. The store's emergency generator was designed to keep the fuel pumps running, not to power the entire building. They would have light from the lanterns, but no heat. The temperature outside had dropped to 15 below zero, and without the heating system, the store's interior would soon become dangerously cold, especially for an already compromised young bear. "We need to create a warm space," Jerry said, his mountain experience taking over. Something small enough to contain body heat. He was already moving, gathering cardboard boxes from the storage room and breaking them down to create makeshift insulation. Mike joined him, understanding the plan without need for explanation. Together, they began constructing a shelter in the corner furthest from the doors, using shelving units as support structures. The cub watched their activities with evident interest, turning its head to follow their movements. Its behavior continued to defy everything both men knew about wild bears. Instead of showing fear or aggression in the face of such activity, it seemed almost curious, as if understanding that these humans were working to help it. As they worked, Jerry shared stories from his years in the mountains, tales of other animals he'd encountered, other storms he'd weathered. Had a mother moose and her calf take shelter in my garage once, he recalled, taping cardboard panels together. Different circumstances, but similar principle. Sometimes wild creatures know when they need human help, even if it goes against their nature. The makeshift shelter took shape quickly. A three-sided structure with a lowered ceiling to help contain warmth. They lined the floor with more cardboard and the remaining clean towels, creating a nest-like space that would help conserve body heat. The lanterns, strategically placed, cast enough light to work by while creating pockets of shadow where the cub might feel more secure. Mike's phone buzzed. A text message had somehow made it through the spotty service. It was from Tom Blackwood. Storm intensifying, roads nearly impassable. Still trying to reach you. Keep the cub warm. Will contact when closer. The message wasn't encouraging, but at least help was still attempting to come. The store's interior. Temperature continued to drop, their breath now clearly visible in the lantern light. The cub had started shivering again, despite its partially dried fur. Mike knew they needed to act quickly to prevent the young bear from slipping back into hypothermia. With careful movements, he approached the cub, speaking softly as he had been doing all night. "Come on, little one," he coaxed, gesturing toward the shelter they'd built. "It'll be warmer in there." To his amazement, the cub seemed to understand. It took unsteady steps in the direction Mike indicated, drawn perhaps by instinct toward the promise of warmth and safety. The security cameras, now running on backup power, continued to record this extraordinary interaction. Jerry watched in astonishment as the cub willingly entered the makeshift den. "In all my years in these mountains," he breathed, "I've never seen anything like this. That bear, it's like it understands everything we're doing." The old mountain man's voice held a note of wonder that made Mike glad to have him there as a witness. Without Jerry's presence, he might have begun to doubt his own perceptions of the night's events. The wind outside reached a new intensity, rattling the windows with such force that both men instinctively ducked. The storm was now officially a blizzard, with visibility reduced to near zero. The temperature inside the store had dropped to just above freezing, making their breath cloud heavily in the lantern light. Mike checked his phone again. No service. They were truly isolated now, cut off from the outside world by the storm's fury. The responsibility of keeping this young, wild creature alive through the night weighed heavily on both men. They had committed to this course of action, and now they had to see it through, whatever challenges the night might bring. The cub had settled into the makeshift den, but its shivering hadn't completely subsided. Without the store's heating system, the cardboard shelter alone wasn't enough to keep it warm. Mike and Jerry exchanged glances, both realizing what needed to be done but hesitant to voice it. Finally, Jerry spoke, his voice gruff with concern. "One of us needs to stay in there with it," he said, stating the obvious but difficult truth. Body heat. It's the only way to keep it warm enough. The suggestion would have seemed insane just hours ago. Sharing a confined space with a wild bear, even a young one, went against every rule of wildlife safety. But this night had already broken all the rules. Mike nodded, already moving toward the shelter. "I'll do it," he said quietly. "It seems to trust me, at least a little." Jerry wanted to argue, to point out the risks, but he knew Mike was right. The cub had formed some sort of connection with the younger man, and in their current situation, that trust might be the difference between survival and tragedy. Before entering the shelter, Mike gathered several energy bars from the store's shelves and a bottle of water. He also grabbed the first aid kit, though he hoped he wouldn't need it. The cub watched his preparations with those intelligent eyes, moving slightly to make room as Mike carefully settled into the confined space. The security footage captured this remarkable moment. A man and a wild bear cub sharing a makeshift den in a powerless gas station while one of the worst storms in recent memory raged outside. The image would later become symbolic of something larger. The unexpected connections that can form between species when survival depends on trust and compassion. Jerry positioned himself nearby, close enough to help if needed, but far enough to give the strange pair some space. He kept one eye on his satellite phone, hoping for word from the Blackwoods, while the other watched the incredible scene unfolding before him. The cub had gradually moved closer to Mike, drawn by his body heat until they were nearly touching. Time seemed to move differently in the lantern-lit store, marked only by the rhythmic howling of the wind and the occasional creak of the building's frame. Mike found himself talking softly to the cub, sharing stories of his own life, his reasons for choosing the solitude of the night shift, his experiences in these mountains. The young bear's eyes never left his face, its attention so focused that it almost seemed to be listening and understanding. The hours crept by in the darkness, marked only by the steady glow of the lanterns and the unrelenting howl of the storm. Mike had lost all sense of normal time. His world narrowed to the confines of the makeshift shelter and the warm presence of the bear cub pressed against his side. The young bear's shivering had finally subsided, replaced by steady breathing that suggested it had found some measure of comfort in this strange situation. Jerry maintained his vigil outside the shelter, occasionally checking his satellite phone for updates from the Blackwoods. Each time, his expression grew more concerned as the messages became increasingly dire. The storm had developed into a full-blown blizzard of historic proportions, forcing even the most experienced rescue workers to halt their efforts until conditions improved. "Mike," Jerry called softly, not wanting to startle either his friend or the cub. "Tom just sent another message. They're stuck at the Anderson Creek checkpoint. Roads are completely buried, and they're saying this might be the worst storm they've seen in 20 years. He paused, letting the information sink in. "We might be on our own until morning." The news settled heavily in the darkness. Mike shifted slightly, careful not to disturb the cub that had finally found rest. The young bear stirred but didn't wake, its trust in these humans now seemingly complete. The security cameras continued their silent vigil, capturing this unprecedented scene, a testament to the extraordinary events unfolding in this remote gas station. As the night deepened, Jerry began to notice something odd about the storm's sound. Between the gusts of wind, there was another noise, faint but distinct, a deep rhythmic huffing that seemed to come from somewhere in the darkness beyond the station's windows. He raised the lantern, trying to pierce the swirling snow, but the light only created a glare against the glass. The cub's reaction was immediate. Its head shot up, ears pricked forward, suddenly alert despite its exhaustion. Mike felt the change in the young bear's posture, a tension that hadn't been there before. The huffing sound grew louder, more insistent, and understanding dawned on both men simultaneously. They weren't alone in the storm anymore. "Mike," Jerry whispered, his voice barely audible above the wind, "I think we might have company." He moved carefully toward the window, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. The beam of his flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing a massive shape moving through the swirling snow, the unmistakable silhouette of an adult bear. The cub responded to the sound with a soft whimper, a noise that seemed to contain equal measures of hope and fear. Mike's heart raced as he realized the implications. This had to be the mother bear, somehow tracking her cub through the brutal storm. The young bear's presence here wasn't just a random accident. It was part of a larger story of survival and determination. Jerry backed slowly away from the window, his expression a mixture of awe and concern. She must have been following its trail all this time, he breathed, fighting through the storm, probably searching for hours. The revelation added new depth to their understanding of the night's events. The cub hadn't just wandered to the gas station by chance. It had been part of a desperate journey, perhaps seeking help not just for itself, but as a way to survive until its mother could find it. The adult bear's movements became more purposeful. As it approached the station, its massive form now clearly visible through the windows. Despite the ferocious storm, it moved with determination, drawn by the scent and sound of its cub. Mike and Jerry exchanged glances, both understanding that they were about to face a new and potentially dangerous challenge. The cub grew increasingly restless, responding to its mother's proximity. Yet surprisingly, it didn't attempt to leave. The shelter instead pressing closer to Mike as if seeking reassurance. This behavior, so contrary to natural instinct, reinforced the extraordinary nature of the bond that had formed during these strange hours. Jerry's satellite phone buzzed. Again, another message from Tom Blackwood. "Mother bear in area. Stay inside. We'll try to reach you with tranquilizer equipment when storm passes." The warning came too late. They were already in the midst of a situation that would require immediate decisions. The adult bear had reached the front of the station, its massive paws leaving deep impressions in the snow. Through the glass, they could see its eyes reflecting the lantern light, not with aggression, but with an intelligence that matched that of its cub. The mother bear raised herself on her hind legs, placing her paws against the window in an echo of her cub's earlier gesture. Mike found himself moving before he had fully formed a plan, guided by instinct and the strange logic of this extraordinary night. "We have to let them reunite," he said quietly, "but we need to do it carefully." Jerry wanted to protest, to point out the obvious dangers, but he too had been changed by the events of the night. Sometimes he realized the right choice wasn't necessarily the safe one. The security cameras recorded every moment as Mike slowly emerged from the shelter, the cub following close behind him. Jerry positioned himself near the door, ready to help, but also prepared to intervene if the situation turned dangerous. The mother bear watched their movements through the glass, her breath fogging the cold surface, but her posture remaining remarkably calm. Time seemed to stand still as Mike reached for the door handle, every movement measured and deliberate. The cub stayed close to his legs, displaying a trust that defied natural law. As the door opened, letting in a blast of Arctic air, the mother bear backed away slightly, maintaining a respectful distance that seemed almost calculated. The reunion that followed would later be described by both men as one of the most remarkable moments of their lives. The cub moved forward slowly, still weakened, but growing stronger with each step. The mother bear waited patiently, her posture neither aggressive nor fearful, but watchful and aware. When the cub finally reached her, their greeting was gentle, a touch of noses, a soft huffing sound that carried over the storm's roar. Mike and Jerry stood in the doorway, witnesses to a scene that challenged everything they thought they knew about wild creatures. The mother bear's behavior suggested an understanding that transcended normal wildlife encounters. She seemed to recognize that these humans had helped her cub, and her response was not the aggression they might have expected, but something that looked remarkably like acknowledgement. The security footage captured this extraordinary moment in perfect detail. The gentle reunion, the mother bear's careful movements, the way she waited for her cub to make the first move toward her. These images would later become evidence of something remarkable, a testament to the unexpected connections that can form between species when circumstances demand it. The storm's intensity seemed to diminish slightly, as if nature itself was pausing to witness this remarkable reunion. The mother bear gently nuzzled her cub, checking it over with careful movements that spoke of relief and concern. The young bear, though still weak, showed new energy in its mother's presence, pressing against her massive form with obvious joy. Mike and Jerry remained motionless in the doorway, understanding that they were witnessing something extraordinary. The mother bear's behavior defied everything they knew about wild animal encounters. Instead of quickly retreating with her cub, she remained near the station, her movements unhurried and deliberate. Her eyes, when they met Mike's, held the same intelligent awareness he had seen in her cub's gaze. "She knows," Jerry whispered, his voice filled with wonder. "Somehow, she understands what we did." The older man's lifetime of mountain experience had taught him to be cautious around wildlife, especially bears. But this encounter was challenging everything he thought he knew. The mother bear's behavior suggested a level of awareness that went beyond mere animal instinct. The security cameras continued recording as the mother bear slowly led her cub a short distance from the station's entrance. Rather than disappearing into the storm, they settled in the lee of the building, where the wind's force was somewhat diminished. The mother bear began methodically cleaning her cub's fur, her actions visible in the spill of light from the station's emergency lanterns. Jerry's satellite phone buzzed again. Another message from Tom Blackwood. "Storm starting to ease. Should be able to reach you within 2 hours. Keep monitoring the bears if possible. This behavior is unprecedented." The message confirmed what both men were already feeling. They were witnessing something that would challenge conventional understanding of wildlife behavior. The power suddenly returned, flooding the station with harsh fluorescent light. The mother bear startled slightly at the change but didn't flee. Instead, she positioned herself between the light and her cub, creating a shadowed space where the young bear could feel secure. This protective gesture, so carefully executed, demonstrated both intelligence and adaptation to the human environment. Mike found himself moving to dim some of the lights, responding to the bear's obvious discomfort with the sudden brightness. The mother bear watched his movements, her head tilted slightly as if assessing his intentions. When he finished adjusting the lights, she relaxed her protective stance, allowing her cub to move more freely again. "Look at the cub's movements," Jerry observed quietly. "It's already stronger than when it first arrived." The young bear was indeed showing improvement, its steps more coordinated as it stayed close to its mother. The warm shelter and rest had helped, but there was something more, a resilience that seemed to flow from the reunion with its mother. The heating system hummed back to life, pushing warm air through the building. Outside, the wind's howl had diminished to a more manageable roar, and the snow's fury seemed to be lessening. The mother bear appeared to sense this change, her attention shifting between her cub and the storm's retreat, as if calculating their next move. Mike used this calmer moment to observe the mother bear more closely. Like her cub, she showed signs of an arduous journey. Her fur was matted in places, and she moved with the careful deliberation of an animal that had pushed itself to its limits. Yet there was also a dignity in her bearing, a quiet strength that commanded respect. Jerry's experience with wildlife allowed him to spot details others might miss. "See how she's favoring her left side?" he murmured to Mike. "And those marks on her flank, looks like she might have had a run-in with something. Could explain why they got separated in the first place." The observation added another layer to their understanding of this family's story. The cub, growing more energetic, began exploring the area immediately around its mother, though it frequently returned to touch noses with her, as if reassuring itself of her presence. Each time it moved toward the station, it would glance at Mike, displaying a trust that somehow hadn't diminished with its mother's arrival. Time passed in this strange tableau. Two men watching two bears, each species seeming to understand that they were part of something unprecedented. The security cameras captured every moment, creating a record that would later provide valuable insights into bear behavior and the potential for human-wildlife interaction. The storm's fury continued to diminish, and with its retreat came new sounds. The distant rumble of vehicles attempting to navigate the snow-covered roads, the occasional crackle of emergency radios carrying on the wind. The outside world was slowly reconnecting with their isolated outpost. Jerry's phone lit up with multiple incoming messages as cell service began to return. Among them was an urgent update from Tom Blackwood. "Almost there. Don't attempt to approach or move the bears. This is an incredible opportunity to document natural behavior." The message was followed by a string of questions about the bear's conditions and interactions. Mike found himself trying to capture every detail of the scene. Before him, knowing that soon this extraordinary encounter would end, the mother bear's presence had transformed their understanding of these creatures. Her intelligence, her careful interactions, her obvious gratitude all spoke to a level of awareness that challenged conventional wisdom about wildlife. The young bear, though clearly revitalized by its mother's presence, hadn't forgotten the kindness it had received. It made several trips to the station's entrance, each time looking at Mike with those remarkable eyes that seemed to hold such understanding. The mother bear allowed these movements, watching but not interfering, as if acknowledging the unique bond that had formed during the crisis. The sound of approaching vehicles became more distinct. The Blackwoods were finally getting close. The mother bear's ears twitched at the noise, and she began to move with more purpose, gently guiding her cub away from the station's immediate vicinity. Yet she didn't rush, her movements remaining deliberate and calm. Mike and Jerry watched. As the bears moved toward the tree line, their forms gradually becoming less distinct in the diminishing storm. The cub turned back one final time, meeting Mike's gaze in a moment that would stay with him forever. There was something in that last look, a connection that transcended the natural boundaries between humans and wild creatures. The security footage captured these final moments. The careful retreat, the last backward glance, the way the mother bear waited patiently for her cub to say its goodbye. These images would later become part of a larger study of bear behavior, challenging preconceptions about these animals' capacity for awareness and interaction with humans. The first rays of dawn were beginning to pierce the storm clouds when Tom and Sarah Blackwood's vehicle finally pulled into the gas station's lot. The experienced wildlife specialists emerged from their heavy-duty truck, equipped with tranquilizer gear and tracking equipment they no longer needed. Their expressions shifted from professional readiness to amazement as Jerry and Mike recounted the night's extraordinary events. Sarah Blackwood, a renowned expert in bear behavior with 20 years of field experience, immediately began reviewing the security footage. Her hands trembled slightly as she watched the unprecedented interactions unfold on the screen. "This is remarkable," she breathed, her eyes fixed on the images of the cub's initial approach to the station. "In all my years studying bears, I've never seen anything like this." Tom, meanwhile, had begun examining the tracks left in the snow, his weathered face thoughtful as he reconstructed the bear's movements. The story written in the snow matched perfectly with Mike and Jerry's account, the cub's desperate arrival, the mother's careful approach, their gentle reunion and measured retreat. But there was more to be read in those tracks. "The mother bear's prints tell us something interesting," Tom called out, kneeling beside a particularly clear impression. "See these marks here? She was injured probably about a week ago, must have been separated from the cub during whatever happened." He stood slowly, brushing snow from his knees. The fact that they found each other again, especially in these conditions, it's almost miraculous. Inside the station, Sarah was making detailed notes as she continued reviewing the footage. Her expertise allowed her to recognize subtle details that others might have missed. "The cub's behavior was extraordinary," she explained, rewinding a particular sequence. "Bears typically avoid human structures at all costs, especially in winter. For this little one to actively seek help, it suggests both incredible intelligence and desperate circumstances." The morning light grew stronger, revealing the full impact of the storm. The landscape had been transformed into a pristine white expanse, broken only by the tracks that told the story of the night's events. Mike stood at the window, his thoughts still with the bears that had shared those remarkable hours with them. The empty makeshift shelter in the corner stood as a testament to the extraordinary encounter. Jerry's satellite phone buzzed with an incoming message. "Game wardens found something," he announced, reading the text. "Up near Thompson Pass, about 8 miles from here. Looks like there was a landslide last week that destroyed several bear dens. They think that's what separated our bears." The news provided crucial context to the night's events, helping them understand the desperate circumstances that had led to this unprecedented encounter. Sarah emerged from reviewing the security footage, her professional composure slightly shaken by what she had seen. "We need to document this properly," she said, her voice carrying the weight of scientific significance. "This isn't just an interesting wildlife encounter. It's evidence of cognitive abilities in bears that we've only theorized about until now. The way the cub deliberately sought help, the mother's understanding of the situation, it challenges everything we think we know about these animals." Tom returned from his examination of the tracks, carrying his camera full of documented evidence. "The bears are heading northwest," he reported, pointing toward the tree line, "moving steady but slow. Mother's favoring that injured leg, but they should be able to find suitable shelter." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "We could track them, tag them for study." "No," Mike interrupted, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. "They've been through enough. They deserve their privacy now." He looked at the wildlife experts, silently pleading for understanding. To his relief, both Tom and Sarah nodded in agreement. "He's right," Sarah said softly. "We have the footage, the tracks, all the documentation we need. Sometimes the best way to study wildlife is to respect their space." She turned to Mike and Jerry, her expression serious. "But we would like to interview both of you, get your detailed accounts of everything that happened. This experience, it could change how we think about bear intelligence and behavior." As the morning progressed, more vehicles began arriving at the station. News of the extraordinary encounter had spread through local wildlife channels, drawing researchers and officials eager to understand what had happened. Mike found himself repeatedly telling the story, each retelling bringing back vivid memories of those incredible hours. Jerry, who had seen so much in his years in the mountains, became an important voice in validating the events. His experience and reputation lent credibility to what might otherwise have seemed an unbelievable tale. "I've spent my life in these mountains," he told the growing audience of wildlife experts and local authorities, "but I've never seen anything that comes close to what happened here last night." The security footage became the center of attention, with experts gathering around the monitor to study every detail of the unprecedented encounter. Each viewing revealed new aspects of the bear's behavior that challenged conventional understanding. The cub's initial approach, the mother's careful reunion, their measured departure, every moment contained insights into bear intelligence and behavior. Sarah Blackwood had begun preparing a preliminary report, her fingers flying over her laptop keyboard as she documented the event. "This could be groundbreaking," she explained to Mike during a quiet moment. "We've always suspected that bears were capable of complex decision-making and emotional intelligence, but we've never had such clear evidence. What happened here last night could fundamentally change how we think about wildlife consciousness." As the morning wore on, Mike found his thoughts repeatedly returning to those final moments with the bears. The last look the cub had given him, the mother's careful acknowledgement. These memories felt almost sacred, beyond the realm of scientific study or professional documentation. He understood the importance of what they had witnessed, but he also felt protective of the experience, wanting to preserve some part of its mystery and magic. The gas station, now returning to its normal routine, felt somehow different in the aftermath of the night's events. The space where the makeshift shelter had stood seemed to hold a lingering energy, as if marked by the extraordinary connection that had formed there. Mike knew that this place, this ordinary way station on a mountain highway, would forever be changed in his mind. Jerry approached him as the morning shift arrived, bringing fresh staff who looked bewildered at the collection of wildlife experts and officials gathered in their store. "You know," the older man said quietly, "some things that happen in these mountains defy explanation. What happened here last night, maybe we don't need to understand it completely. Maybe it's enough just to know that it happened." In the weeks that followed, the story of the gas station bear encounter spread far beyond the mountains of Montana. Local news stations picked up the story first, drawn by the security footage that showed such extraordinary interaction between humans and wild animals. Soon, national media outlets began calling, fascinated by this tale of compassion and survival that challenged conventional wisdom about wildlife behavior. Mike found himself thrust into an unexpected spotlight, something that made him distinctly uncomfortable. He preferred the quiet solitude of his night shifts to the constant requests for interviews and appearances on morning shows. Yet he understood the importance of sharing what had happened, of helping others understand the depth of intelligence and awareness they had witnessed in these magnificent creatures. Sarah Blackwood's preliminary report had sparked intense interest in the scientific community. Wildlife behavior experts from around the country began arriving in Montana, eager to study the footage and interview those involved. The gas station's security cameras had captured something that went beyond mere documentation of an unusual event. They had recorded evidence that would reshape our understanding of bear cognition and emotional capacity. The footage shows clear evidence of reasoned decision-making. One prominent wildlife behaviorist explained during a presentation at the local university. The cubs' initial approach to the station wasn't random wandering. It was a deliberate choice to seek help. And the mother's behavior during the reunion, it suggests a level of awareness we've never been able to document before. Jerry, despite his usual preference for staying out of the spotlight, became an important voice in validating the scientific significance of what they had witnessed. His decades of experience in the mountains gave weight to his observations about how extraordinary the bear's behavior had been. "I've seen bears in every situation imaginable," he would tell researchers, "but never anything like this. Those bears knew exactly what they were doing." The location of the gas station began drawing visitors, people hoping to see where this remarkable event had taken place. Mike would sometimes notice them standing outside, taking pictures of the spot where the makeshift shelter had been, or examining the window where the mother bear had first appeared. The ordinary building had become something of a landmark, a place where the boundary between human and wild had momentarily dissolved. Tom Blackwood continued monitoring the area where the bears had disappeared into the forest, though he respected Mike's wish not to actively track them. His periodic reports brought comfort to those who had witnessed that extraordinary night. "They're doing well," he would say, describing signs of the bear's presence in the area. "The mother's injury has healed, and they've established a new den further up in the mountains." The security footage became the subject of intense study, with experts analyzing every frame for new insights into bear behavior. Each viewing seemed to reveal new details, subtle interactions between mother and cub, moments of communication that had gone unnoticed in the intensity of the actual event. The footage was eventually included in several scientific papers examining animal intelligence and emotional complexity. Sarah's comprehensive report, when finally published, sent ripples through the wildlife research community. "What we witnessed that night," she wrote, "challenges our fundamental assumptions about the limitations of wild animal behavior. The bears displayed not only problem-solving abilities and emotional intelligence, but also a capacity for trust and gratitude that we typically associate only with domestic animals or primates. Mike kept his own copy of the security footage, though he rarely watched it. His memories of that night were more valuable to him than the grainy images captured by the cameras. He remembered the weight of the cub pressed against him in the makeshift shelter, the intelligence in its eyes, the gentle way the mother bear had acknowledged their help. These were moments that no camera could fully capture. The gas station's owner, recognizing the historical significance of what had happened, installed a small plaque near the entrance. It told the story simply, without embellishment, ending with a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary moments come when we choose to help, even in situations that seem impossible. Travelers would often stop to read it, their expressions thoughtful as they considered what it meant. Jerry continued his fuel deliveries, though he now found himself sharing the story with other drivers on his route. "It changed how I see things," he would tell them, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had witnessed something profound. "Makes you wonder what else these creatures are capable of, what other mysteries these mountains hold." The event sparked renewed interest in bear conservation efforts, with many people moved by the demonstration of these animals' intelligence and emotional capacity. Local wildlife organizations reported increased support for their programs, and there was a new emphasis on understanding and protecting bear habitats. The story had touched something in people, reminding them of the complex and valuable lives of the creatures with whom we share our world. Mike's night shifts returned to their usual routine, but he found himself watching the darkness beyond the windows with new awareness. Every shadow held the possibility of another extraordinary encounter, though he knew that what had happened that night was unique. Still, his experience had left him with a deeper appreciation for the mysteries that existed in the wild places of the world. The scientific community continued to debate the implications of what had happened at the Pinewood Gas Station. Some researchers saw it as evidence of previously unknown capabilities in bears, while others suggested it was an extraordinary but isolated incident. Yet all agreed that the event had opened new questions about animal intelligence and the potential for meaningful interaction between species. As spring began to soften the mountain's harsh edges, bringing new life to the landscape, Mike often found himself thinking about the bears. He wondered if they remembered that night as clearly as he did, if somewhere in their wild hearts they carried the memory of the humans who had helped them when they needed it most. The security cameras might have captured the physical reality of what happened, but the true meaning of that encounter lived in the understanding that had formed between species. Local schools began incorporating the story into their wildlife education programs, using it to teach children about both the intelligence of wild animals and the importance of respecting their space. The tale served as a powerful reminder that compassion and understanding could bridge even the widest of natural divides, though teachers were careful to emphasize that this was an extraordinary situation that shouldn't be recreated. 1 year later, the Pinewood Gas Station stood unchanged against the Montana sky, its weathered sign still guiding travelers through the mountain passes. Mike had kept his night shift position, finding comfort in the familiar routine that had once been interrupted by that extraordinary encounter. The events of that stormy night had faded into legend, though the security footage continued to draw interest from researchers and wildlife enthusiasts around the world. The spring thaw had brought new life to the mountains, and with it came occasional reports from hikers and rangers who had spotted a mother bear and her now adolescent cub in the area. Tom Blackwood, who had maintained a careful distance while monitoring their progress, confirmed through distinctive markings that these were indeed the same bears from that remarkable night. The mother's injury had healed completely, and the cub had grown into a strong young bear, showing all the natural wariness of its kind. Sarah Blackwood's comprehensive study of the event had finally been published in a prestigious wildlife journal, sparking renewed discussion about animal intelligence and the capacity for cross-species interaction. Her paper included detailed analysis of the bear's behavior, supported by the security footage that had captured every moment of that unprecedented encounter. The scientific community's response had been intense, leading to new research initiatives focused on understanding the cognitive abilities of wild animals. Jerry had become something of a local celebrity, though he carried the recognition with characteristic humility. His fuel delivery routes now often included stops to share the story with curious listeners, each telling bringing back the wonder of that night. He had developed a particular way of relating the events, emphasizing not just the extraordinary nature of the bear's behavior, but the deeper message about compassion and trust that had emerged from the encounter. The gas station itself had become an unofficial landmark, drawing visitors who had heard the story and wanted to see where it had happened. Mike would sometimes notice people standing in the parking lot, looking at the window where the cub had first appeared, or examining the spot where the makeshift shelter had stood. Their expressions often held a mixture of wonder and hope, as if seeking some lingering trace of the magic that had occurred there. Local wildlife authorities had reported a significant change in public attitudes toward bear conservation in the wake of the event. The story had touched something in people, helping them see these powerful creatures not just as wild animals to be feared or managed, but as intelligent beings capable of complex behavior and emotional connections. Donations to bear conservation projects had increased, and there was growing support for initiatives to protect bear habitats and migration corridors. On quiet nights, when the mountain winds whispered around the station's corners, Mike would sometimes find himself remembering the details that hadn't made it into the official reports or news stories. The weight of the cub pressed against him in the makeshift shelter, the intelligence in its eyes, the gentle way the mother bear had acknowledged their help before leading her cub away into the storm. These personal memories felt more valuable than all the scientific analysis and media coverage that had followed. The security cameras still maintained their vigilant watch over the station, though they had never again captured anything as extraordinary as the events of that night. Mike had kept his own copy of the footage, stored safely away but rarely watched. The grainy images couldn't capture the true essence of what had happened. The fear, the trust, the connection that had formed between species in those desperate hours. Sarah's research had led to some unexpected discoveries about bear behavior in the region. Trail cameras placed in the area had captured instances of bears showing surprisingly sophisticated problem-solving abilities, though nothing that matched the extraordinary interaction at the gas station. What we witnessed that night was unique, she would explain in her presentations, but it opened our eyes to possibilities we hadn't considered before. The plaque that had been installed near the station's entrance had weathered its first year, its simple message touching countless travelers who stopped to read it. It didn't try to explain or analyze what had happened. instead simply telling the story of a night when the barriers between human and wild had momentarily dissolved, leading to an encounter that defied explanation. Jerry's satellite phone, still carrying the saved messages from that night, had become something of a historical artifact. The Blackwoods had asked to include photographs of the messages in their research archives, seeing them as important documentation of how the event had unfolded. The simple text captured the progression from crisis to miracle, recording the human response to an unprecedented situation. As spring moved towards summer, the mountains showed no sign of the dramatic events that had unfolded during that winter storm. Nature had continued its eternal cycle, unconcerned with the boundaries between wild and civilized that humans tried to maintain. The bears had returned to their natural patterns, avoiding human contact and living as their kind had for countless generations. Mike had declined most requests for interviews and appearances, preferring to let the scientific community tell the story through their research and analysis. Yet he had written his own private account of that night, recording every detail he could remember, not just the extraordinary behavior of the bears, but the feelings and insights that had come with the experience. These personal reflections, though never shared publicly, captured the human element of the story that the security footage and scientific papers couldn't convey. The Pinewood Gas Station's late-night customers often asked about the event, having heard various versions of the story. Mike would answer their questions quietly, neither embellishing nor diminishing what had happened. He had come to understand that some experiences defied explanation, that sometimes the most extraordinary moments in life were better left wrapped in the mystery that surrounded them. The mountains kept their secrets, the wild creatures that called them home, continuing their ancient patterns of survival. Yet something had changed in the way people viewed these lands and their inhabitants. The story of the gas station bears had reminded them that the line between wild and tame, between animal and human understanding, was perhaps more fluid than they had imagined. And so the story became part of the mountain's legacy, a reminder that even in the most ordinary places, extraordinary moments of connection and compassion could occur. The security footage would continue to be studied. The scientific papers would be written and debated. But the true magic of that night lived on in the quiet understanding of those who had witnessed it, a testament to the mysteries that still existed in the wild places of the world. 2 years had passed since that extraordinary night at the Pinewood Gas Station, and the impact of those events continued to ripple through both the scientific community and popular consciousness. The story had taken on a life of its own, touching hearts and changing perspectives far beyond the mountains of Montana. What had begun as a desperate encounter on a stormy night had evolved into something more profound, a testament to the unexpected connections that could form between species. The changing seasons had brought new discoveries about the bear family that had sparked this remarkable tale. Wildlife photographers had occasionally captured images of the mother and her now-grown cub, thriving in their mountain habitat. The young bear had developed into a strong, healthy adult, showing no unusual attraction to human structures, but maintaining a mysterious awareness that set it apart from other bears in the region. Tom and Sarah Blackwood's ongoing research had revealed subtle changes in bear behavior patterns throughout the area. While no other bears had sought human help as directly as the cub had that night, there were increasing instances of bears showing unexpected problem-solving abilities and awareness of human presence. The security footage from that night had become a cornerstone of their studies, referenced in numerous scientific papers and presentations about animal intelligence. Mike still worked his night shift at the gas station, though he had been offered various opportunities to leave for more prestigious positions. The solitude of those quiet hours suited him, allowing him time to reflect on the experience that had changed his understanding of the natural world. He had developed a deeper appreciation for the wilderness that surrounded the station, seeing it not as an alien territory, but as a realm of intelligence and possibility. The station itself had become something more than just a waypoint for travelers. People would stop not only for fuel and supplies, but to stand for a moment in the spot where something extraordinary had occurred. The simple plaque that told the story had been joined by a small educational display designed by local wildlife authorities to help visitors understand the broader implications of what had happened there. Jerry's fuel delivery routes had evolved to include regular updates on wildlife activity in the area. His keen eye and decades of mountain experience made him an invaluable observer, helping researchers track changes in animal behavior that might be linked to the increased understanding of bear intelligence. The old mountain man had found a new purpose in his work, becoming a bridge between the scientific community and the practical knowledge of those who lived and worked in these wild places. Sarah Blackwood's original research paper had spawned numerous follow-up studies, each exploring different aspects of the extraordinary encounter. The security footage continued to yield new insights, as advances in technology allowed researchers to analyze subtle details of the bear's behavior that hadn't been apparent at first viewing. Each new study seemed to reveal another layer of complexity in the interaction between humans and wildlife. Local schools had developed a curriculum around the event, using it as a starting point for discussing wildlife conservation, animal intelligence, and the importance of maintaining wild spaces. Children in the area grew up knowing the story not just as a local legend, but as a real example of the unexpected connections that could form between species. Their questions and insights often brought new perspectives to the ongoing discussion of what had happened that night. The gas station's security cameras had been upgraded, part of a broader wildlife monitoring program that hoped to capture more evidence of extraordinary animal behavior. While nothing as dramatic as the original encounter had been recorded, the cameras occasionally caught moments that suggested the bears in the area had developed a unique awareness of human presence, not seeking interaction, but showing an understanding that went beyond normal wild behavior. Mike had finally agreed to record a detailed oral history of the event, working with local historians to preserve not just the facts, but the emotional truth of what had happened. His account, combined with Jerry's observations and the Blackwoods' scientific analysis, provided a complete picture of an encounter that had challenged conventional understanding of wildlife behavior. The recording became part of the state's historical archives, ensuring that future generations would have access to this remarkable story. The scientific impact of the event had extended far beyond bear behavior studies. Researchers in various fields of animal intelligence and cognitive development had found relevant insights in the footage and documentation of that night. The clear evidence of reasoned decision-making and emotional awareness in the bears had opened new avenues of research into animal consciousness and interspecies communication. Conservation efforts in the region had seen unprecedented success in the wake of the event. The story had touched something in people, helping them see the importance of preserving wild spaces and protecting the intelligent creatures that called them home. Funding for wildlife corridors and habitat protection had increased, and there was growing support for measures to reduce human-wildlife conflict. The mother bear and her offspring had become symbols of the complex relationship between humans and wildlife. While they remained wild animals, living as nature intended, their story had helped change how people viewed the creatures with whom they shared the landscape. The intelligence and awareness they had displayed that night had challenged the traditional boundaries between human and animal understanding. Jerry's collection of photographs and notes from the aftermath of the event had been donated to a local museum, forming the core of an exhibit about wildlife intelligence and conservation. Visitors could trace the story through his documentation, seeing how an extraordinary encounter had evolved into a broader movement for understanding and protecting wild creatures. As another winter approached, bringing with it memories of that stormy night, Mike often found himself watching the darkness beyond the station's windows with a sense of anticipation. While he knew the unique circumstances of that encounter were unlikely to be repeated, the experience had left him with an enduring awareness of the mysteries that existed in the wild places of the world. The mountains kept their ancient rhythms, the wild creatures following paths laid down by countless generations before them. Yet something had changed in the relationship between humans and the wilderness they sought to understand. The story of the gas station bears had become more than just an extraordinary tale. It had become a reminder that the boundaries between species were perhaps more fluid than anyone had imagined, that moments of connection and understanding could occur in the most unexpected places. If this story has touched you, please take a moment to like and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing these remarkable tales of connection between humans and the natural world. Don't forget to hit the notification bell to stay updated on more extraordinary stories that challenge our understanding of the wild creatures with whom we share this planet. 3 years after the extraordinary encounter at Pinewood Gas Station, the transformation of the site into an unofficial wildlife observation point had been completed. Researchers from around the world would visit the location, drawn by the possibility of witnessing similar instances of intelligent animal behavior. The small gas station had become a symbol of something larger, a reminder that the boundaries between human civilization and wild nature were more permeable than anyone had previously imagined. The original security cameras that had captured the remarkable footage had been preserved in their positions, though supplemented by more sophisticated monitoring equipment. Wildlife researchers had established a permanent observation post nearby, carefully designed to maintain a respectful distance from the natural movement patterns of local bears. Their presence had yielded valuable data about bear behavior in the area, though nothing quite as extraordinary as that stormy night had been recorded since. Mike had finally accepted an offer to contribute to a comprehensive book about the encounter, working with wildlife experts to provide his first-hand account of the events. His perspective, combined with scientific analysis and Jerry's experienced observations, offered readers a complete picture of how that night had unfolded. The book had become a bestseller in its category, introducing the story to an even wider audience and sparking important discussions about wildlife intelligence. The local community had embraced their role as guardians of this remarkable story. Annual events commemorating the encounter brought together scientists, conservationists, and curious visitors, all seeking to understand more about the intelligent creatures that shared their mountain home. These gatherings had evolved into important forums for discussing wildlife protection and human-animal coexistence. Sarah Blackwood's research team had documented subtle but significant changes in bear behavior throughout the region. The bears seem to have developed a more nuanced understanding of human presence, neither seeking interaction nor showing excessive fear. This balanced awareness had led to fewer conflicts between humans and bears, supporting the theory that these creatures possessed greater cognitive sophistication than previously believed. Jerry's role had expanded beyond his fuel delivery duties. He had become an important liaison between the scientific community and local residents, helping to bridge the gap between academic research and practical mountain knowledge. His deep understanding of the area's wildlife, combined with his first-hand experience of that extraordinary night, made him an invaluable resource for researchers studying bear behavior. The mother bear and her offspring had been spotted periodically over the years, always maintaining a respectful distance but showing no sign of fear. Wildlife photographers had captured remarkable images of them, noting how their behavior seemed to influence other bears in the area. The young bear, now fully grown, had developed into a magnificent creature that carried itself with unusual awareness and confidence. Educational programs based on the gas station encounter had spread beyond the local area, becoming part of wildlife curriculum in schools across the country. The story provided a perfect platform for teaching young people about animal intelligence, conservation, and the importance of maintaining wild spaces. Students were particularly moved by the evidence of emotional intelligence displayed by the bears that night. The scientific papers that had emerged from studying the encounter continued to influence research in various fields. The clear documentation of reasoned decision-making by both bears had opened new avenues of investigation into animal consciousness. Researchers in fields ranging from cognitive science to evolutionary biology found relevant insights in the footage and subsequent observations. Mike's night shifts at the gas station had taken on an almost ceremonial quality. Visitors would often stop by during his hours, hoping to hear the story directly from one of its principal witnesses. He had developed a way of telling it that emphasized not just the extraordinary nature of the encounter, but its deeper implications for understanding our relationship with the natural world. The security footage had been carefully preserved and digitally enhanced, revealing previously unnoticed details of the bear's behavior. Each viewing seemed to provide new insights into the sophisticated nature of their actions that night. The footage had become an important reference point for researchers studying animal intelligence and emotional capacity. Conservation efforts, inspired by the encounter, had led to significant improvements in wildlife protection throughout the region. New wildlife corridors had been established, allowing bears and other creatures to move safely through their traditional territories. The gas station story had helped people understand the importance of preserving these wild spaces and the intelligent beings that inhabited them. The plaque that told the story had been joined by a more comprehensive educational display, featuring information about bear behavior, intelligence, and conservation. Visitors could learn about the scientific implications of what had happened that night, while also absorbing the emotional impact of this extraordinary tale of cross-species connection. Tom Blackwood's careful monitoring of the area had revealed interesting patterns in how the local bear population had adapted to human presence. While maintaining their wild nature, the bears showed subtle signs of increased awareness and sophistication in their behavior. This evolution suggested that the intelligence displayed that night wasn't an isolated incident, but part of these creatures' natural capacity for learning and adaptation. The Pinewood Gas Station itself had been preserved largely unchanged, maintaining the authenticity of the location where this remarkable event had occurred. The spot where the makeshift shelter had stood was marked with a simple indicator, allowing visitors to stand where Mike had spent those extraordinary hours with the bear cub. The windows where the mother bear had appeared still looked out over the same mountain landscape, though the view was now charged with new meaning. The impact of that night continued to ripple through both scientific and popular understanding of wildlife behavior. What had begun as a desperate encounter between humans and wild creatures had evolved into something more profound. A window into the sophisticated inner lives of animals and their capacity for reasoned interaction with humans. As another winter settled over the mountains, bringing with it memories of that remarkable night, the gas station stood as a beacon of hope and possibility. It reminded all who visited that in the space between wild and tame, between human understanding and animal intelligence, there existed possibilities for connection that defied conventional wisdom. The story lived on, not just in scientific papers and educational programs, but in the quiet moments when humans and wild creatures shared the landscape, each perhaps a little more aware of the other's capacity for understanding and compassion. If you've been moved by this extraordinary tale of connection between humans and wildlife, please take a moment to share it with others. Your support helps spread awareness about the remarkable intelligence of wild creatures and the importance of preserving their habitats. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories that challenge our understanding of the natural world. 5 years had passed since that extraordinary night at the Pinewood Gas Station, and the legacy of that remarkable encounter continued to evolve in unexpected ways. The story had transcended its origins as a local tale of survival and compassion, becoming part of a larger narrative about the relationship between humans and wildlife. The small Montana gas station, once just a waypoint for travelers, now stood as a testament to the possibilities that existed when the barriers between species dissolved. International wildlife organizations had begun incorporating lessons learned from the encounter into their conservation strategies. The clear evidence of sophisticated decision-making by both bears had challenged traditional approaches to wildlife management. Conservationists around the world were developing new methods that took into account the complex intelligence and emotional capacity of wild animals, leading to more successful protection programs. The scientific understanding of bear cognition had undergone a revolutionary change, sparked by the detailed analysis of that night's events. Research teams studying bear behavior had documented numerous instances of problem-solving and emotional intelligence that might have been overlooked before. The gas station encounter had opened researchers' eyes to possibilities they hadn't previously considered, leading to breakthrough discoveries about animal consciousness. Mike had accepted a position as an advisor to a wildlife research foundation, though he continued his night shifts at the gas station. His unique experience had given him insights that proved valuable to scientists studying animal behavior. The quiet hours in the station now served a dual purpose: maintaining his connection to the place where everything had changed, while contributing to ongoing research about wildlife intelligence. Local tourism had evolved to accommodate the site's new significance, but in a way that respected its importance. Guided visits were carefully managed to avoid disrupting wildlife patterns, while educational programs helped visitors understand the broader implications of what had happened there. The gas station had become a place of pilgrimage for those seeking to understand the possibilities for connection between humans and wild creatures. Jerry's observations over the years had been compiled into a comprehensive database of wildlife behavior in the region. His detailed notes about changes in bear behavior following the encounter provided valuable information about how these intelligent creatures adapted and learned. The old mountain man's practical wisdom, combined with scientific analysis, had created a more complete picture of wildlife adaptation and intelligence. The mother bear and her offspring had become almost mythical figures in the local ecosystem. Though rarely seen, their presence was felt in the subtle changes they had inspired in other bears' behavior. Wildlife photographers who managed to capture images of them reported an almost uncanny awareness in their behavior, as if they carried the memory of that night in their genetic code. Sarah Blackwood's research had expanded to include studies of similar incidents around the world. While none matched the extraordinary nature of the gas station encounter, there were enough parallels to suggest that wild animals possessed greater capacity for reasoned interaction with humans than previously believed. Her work had helped establish a new field of study focused on interspecies communication and understanding. The security footage had been digitally preserved and enhanced, becoming part of the Smithsonian's archive of significant wildlife documentation. Researchers continued to study the subtle nuances of the bear's behavior, finding new insights in their movements and reactions. The footage served as a benchmark against which other instances of wildlife intelligence were measured. Conservation. Efforts inspired by the encounter had led to the establishment of a wildlife corridor stretching from Montana into Canada. This protected pathway allowed bears and other creatures to move safely through their traditional territories, maintaining the delicate balance between wild spaces and human development. The success of this initiative had inspired similar projects around the world. Tom Blackwood's ongoing monitoring of the area had revealed fascinating patterns in bear behavior. The local population showed signs of increased sophistication in their interactions with human-occupied spaces, maintaining a careful distance while displaying remarkable awareness. This evolution in behavior suggested that the intelligence shown that night was not an isolated incident, but part of these creatures' natural capacity for adaptation and learning. Educational programs based on the gas station encounter had been integrated into university curriculum worldwide. The story provided a perfect case study for discussions about animal intelligence, conservation ethics, and the future of human-wildlife coexistence. Students were particularly moved by the evidence of emotional awareness displayed by both bears, challenging traditional assumptions about the limitations of animal consciousness. The Pinewood Gas Station itself had been designated as a historical landmark, recognizing its significance in changing our understanding of wildlife behavior. The simple building, still functioning as a working gas station, stood as a reminder that extraordinary moments of connection could occur in the most ordinary places. Visitors often reported feeling a sense of possibility in the air, as if the boundary between human and wild was somehow thinner there. Mike's detailed accounts of that night had been translated into multiple languages, spreading the story's message of compassion and connection across cultural boundaries. His observations about the bear's behavior, combined with scientific analysis, had helped people around the world understand the sophisticated nature of wildlife intelligence. The universal elements of the story, survival, trust, and cooperation, resonated with people regardless of their background. The impact of the encounter continued to influence wildlife policy and conservation efforts worldwide. The clear evidence of reasoned decision-making by wild creatures had led to more thoughtful approaches to human-wildlife conflict resolution. Conservation organizations increasingly emphasized the importance of understanding and respecting animal intelligence when designing protection strategies. Jerry's role in documenting the aftermath of the encounter had earned him recognition in scientific circles, though he remained humble about his contributions. His practical knowledge of mountain wildlife, combined with his witness to that extraordinary night, made him an invaluable resource for researchers seeking to understand the long-term implications of what had happened. As another winter approached, bringing with it the anniversary of that remarkable night, the gas station stood as a symbol of hope in an increasingly complex world. It reminded all who visited that the boundaries between species were more fluid than anyone had imagined, that moments of genuine connection could emerge from the most desperate circumstances. If this story has touched your heart and opened your mind to the possibilities that exist in the relationship between humans and wildlife, please share it with others. Your support helps spread awareness about the remarkable intelligence of wild creatures and the importance of preserving their habitats. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more extraordinary stories that challenge our understanding of the natural world and remind us of the countless mysteries that still exist in the wild places around us. This extraordinary tale, which began on a stormy night at a remote Montana gas station, has touched hearts and minds around the world, challenging our understanding of the complex relationship between humans and wildlife. The events that unfolded at the Pinewood Gas Station continue to inspire researchers, conservationists, and nature lovers, reminding us that the boundaries between species are more fluid than we once believed. The mother bear and her cub, whose desperate situation led to this unprecedented encounter, became symbols of the intelligence and emotional capacity that exists in the wild. Their story, captured by security cameras and witnessed by Mike and Jerry, opened new avenues of research into animal cognition and behavior. The footage of their interaction remains a testament to the possibilities that exist when humans choose compassion over fear. Sarah Blackwood's groundbreaking research, inspired by that remarkable night, has revolutionized our understanding of bear intelligence. Her studies have revealed patterns of sophisticated decision-making and emotional awareness in wild animals that might have gone unnoticed if not for the gas station encounter. The scientific community continues to draw insights from the detailed documentation of those extraordinary hours. The Pinewood Gas Station itself has become more than just a waypoint for travelers. It stands as a reminder that moments of genuine connection can occur in the most unexpected places. Visitors from around the world come to stand where Mike once sheltered a desperate bear cub, each hoping to understand something about the mystery of that night. The simple plaque that tells their story has touched countless hearts, inspiring a new generation of wildlife advocates. Mike still works his night shift, though his role has expanded to include sharing his experience with researchers and conservation groups. His quiet wisdom about that night has helped shape new approaches to wildlife management and protection. The solitude of his shifts allows him time to reflect on the profound impact of those hours spent with a wild creature that somehow knew to seek human help. Jerry's fuel delivery routes have become something of a wildlife observation circuit. His keen eye and decades of mountain experience make him an invaluable resource for researchers studying changes in bear behavior. The old mountain man's practical knowledge, combined with scientific observation, has helped create a more complete picture of how intelligent creatures adapt and learn from extraordinary experiences. The security footage, preserved and studied by experts worldwide, continues to yield new insights into animal behavior. Each viewing reveals subtle details that add to our understanding of wildlife intelligence. The images of the mother bear's careful approach, the cub's trust, and the moment of reunion have become iconic in the field of animal behavior studies. Conservation efforts inspired by the gas station encounter have led to significant improvements in wildlife protection throughout the region. New corridors allow bears and other creatures to move safely through their traditional territories, while educational programs help people understand the importance of preserving wild spaces. The success of these initiatives has inspired similar projects around the world. Tom and Sarah Blackwood's ongoing research has documented remarkable changes in local bear behavior. While maintaining their natural wariness, the bears show sophisticated awareness of human presence that suggests higher levels of cognitive ability than previously recognized. Their work continues to challenge traditional assumptions about the limitations of animal intelligence. The impact of that stormy night extends far beyond scientific research. Local schools use the story to teach children about wildlife conservation and the importance of compassion. Community groups have developed programs to promote better understanding of the wild creatures that share their mountain home. The gas station has become a symbol of hope, reminding people that moments of genuine connection can emerge from the most desperate circumstances. Mike's decision to help a desperate creature, made in the intense solitude of that winter night, has rippled outward to touch lives around the world. His simple act of compassion, supported by Jerry's mountain wisdom and documented by security cameras, open new possibilities for understanding the complex beings that share our world. The story continues to inspire those who believe in the power of kindness to transcend natural boundaries. The mother bear and her cub, though now living their natural lives in the wild, left an indelible mark on human understanding of wildlife intelligence. Their behavior that night challenged everything we thought we knew about wild creatures, suggesting levels of awareness and emotional capacity that science is only beginning to understand. Their legacy lives on in every new discovery about animal consciousness and capability. As winter returns to the mountains each year, bringing with it memories of that extraordinary night, the Pinewood Gas Station stands as a beacon of possibility. It reminds us that in the space between wild and tame, between human understanding and animal intelligence, there exist opportunities for connection that defy conventional wisdom. The story of the gas station bears has become more than just a tale of survival. It has become a testament to the mysteries that still exist in the wild places of our world. This incredible journey of compassion, trust, and understanding continues to touch hearts and change perspectives. It reminds us that even in our modern world, there are still moments of magic and connection that can transform our understanding of the creatures with whom we share this planet. The gas station bears showed us that when we open our hearts to the possibilities, extraordinary things can happen. If you've been moved by this remarkable story of connection between humans and wildlife, please take a moment to share it with others. Your support helps spread awareness about the extraordinary intelligence of wild creatures and the importance of preserving their habitats. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories that challenge our understanding of the natural world and remind us of the countless mysteries that still exist in the wild places around us. Together, we can help ensure that stories like this continue to inspire future generations to protect and preserve the remarkable creatures with whom we share our world.